Hello, my name is Savannah Bush, and today I will be presenting my project on the Three Mile Island nuclear incident that occurred in 1979. The purpose and objective of this project is to really just give you guys some background and knowledge on how the incident occurred and why it was such a big deal at the time and what it did to affect current policy on nuclear energy and how we use nuclear power in the US today. Here's a quick little table of contents going through and dissecting like what we will cover in total. An introduction, a timeline, health outcomes, public perception, radiation response, the legacy of the island today, and a summary. So for a quick little overview, the Three Mile Island was located on the Saskatchewan River in Middleton, Pennsylvania, or near Middleton, Pennsylvania, which is approximately 10 miles from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, which is the capital. And the site was finished on December of 1978, which is a really important date because that is only 3 months prior to the date of the incident. I really want to really, get across that this was a big deal for the people in the town, people living here, because it opened up so many job opportunities for people. People were excited to see where nuclear energy was today and what it was. And it was a very progressive time. This is 1978. This is the year of Grease. This is the year the Walkman was first developed. This is the year of the first test tube baby. Like people were very pro environment, pro-America, but anti-war. That was the time period. So people were very excited about this. And here's a quick little map kind of showing where everything went down. As you can see on my right over here, we have Unit 2, which is where the incident occurred. And on my left, we have Unit 1, which is the structure with the smoke coming out at the top. And that was the first unit that was built in 1969, if I'm not mistaken. So all the structures were built all in a decade. And it took a lot of time, but people were still very excited. The structure is still up today, but as of 2019, government cut funding. So, from what I'm aware of, it's not in power anymore. And here is just a little timeline of how everything unfolded. As you can see, everything kind of happened within a couple hours of each other in a couple of days. As you can see on March 28th, 1979 at 4 a.m., that is when a minor malfunction occurred. That's when it first started occurring. And then by 4:02 already, they were suffering consequences and complications within the relief valve of it not closing after they opened it. By 4:15, we have scientists and engineers freaking out, not knowing what to do, misinterpreting instruments and data, and it was just a catastrophe already. By March 30th, the hydrogen bubble had already been discovered, and the not only the governor, but also the media had all worked together to kind of make this a speculation. People were horrified. I had family accounts. So when I was doing this project to try to figure out what the time was like, what it was like to see this on national television, I have cousins that lived in Harrisburg at the time, and they said people were scared. People were scared because the media was releasing that, you know, children might end up with special needs or disabilities after this, and pregnant women need to evacuate because it was just so scary. And then by April 1st, President Jimmy Carter himself went to visit Three Mile Island, and the hydrogen bubble began to dissipate. Here, as you can see, there were really no health impacts. It was a huge scare, but there were no physical health impacts. The largest effect it had on the average population was psychological and stress related. People began to develop very poor mental health because not only did they no longer have faith in the government, who made this seem like a big deal, something to be excited about, but they were also scared, like, what were the long-term effects, especially after how the media was posing it? What would this do to them long term? They weren't sure. And as I was previously stating, public perception declined drastically. We went from, less than half of the population being a little on edge about what would happen with nuclear energy and what nuclear power would do. And then it rose to 20%. 65% of the population was in opposition of the power plant after this, and 36% of the population trust in nuclear power and science and the government declined. Over 104 power plants that were planned to be built within the next few years were canceled because people were scared who wanted to work there. And I mean, for reference, over 140,000 people had evacuated due to the media coverage on this and just not knowing what was going to happen. People were scared, so people left. They didn't know what to do, which is why it was such a big deal at the time. And here, as you can see, this is just more proof that there was no physical harm. As you can see, the background radiation that humans already face on the day to day was is higher significantly compared to the radiation after the incident in a 5 mile, 10-mile radius, and Harrisburg also being approximately 10 miles away. As you can see, people weren't really facing that much radiation harm, you know? As you can see on the far left, the site boundary itself was able to contain a lot of that radiation. So people were not affected highly from this. There were zero fatalities total. And here's a little quick overview of the incidents that occurred after this. Yes, it was a huge deal. It was very pivotal. It because it occurred and because there was so much speculation around the situation, the government did their best to enact policy on change and operator errors and try to really boost the nuclear energy proposition again, try to get people excited about it. But again, still things happen. We had Chernobyl occurred almost 10 years later, and that was arguably the largest global nuclear accident that occurred because there were over 4,000 fatalities in the Chernobyl incident. There was even biological damage to trees. So now there's pictures on the internet of only trees that can grow on the site of Chernobyl because of the radiation's effects on the biological chemistry of the trees. That's how big of a deal it was. But still, the 3 Mile incident in America was so pivotal because the government realized like we have to get this under control. And I just want to reference that 12 days after this incident occurred, a movie called The China Syndrome, starring the environmental activist herself, Jane Fonda, was released to the public. And the movie essentially is about nuclear energy and nuclear incident that happened that the government was trying to cover up. So it still made people very scared. Although there were no fatalities and people weren't hurt, they were mentally on edge. There was no trust there. And just to summarize all of this again, this led to the creation of the Institute of Nuclear Power Operations. People were very, very keen on like working to get nuclear energy back to the point it was when people were first originally excited about that. So that meant a lot of reform within nuclear energy and the way it was handled. Mandatory improvements were required in all nuclear power plants in the US and future ones. Valve position monitoring, emergency cooling systems were put in place, and even there was an emphasis on operator training. People were required to do a lot more schooling to get into the field. And emergency response protocols were also put in place so that the next time something like this happened, people would know what to do. The scientists would know what to do, and it could be put under control. But the accident triggered one of the most comprehensive regulatory overhauls in nuclear history, and I think it's very interesting. But thank you for listening to me today.